Hey, greetings everybody. GleeCon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. And this is a special little addendum I'm adding on because, well, it's not little, but I'm gonna miss everybody so much from coming out. Like I said on the last episode, I'm going out of town for a few days, and while I'm gonna have fun with that, that's gonna mean 3 or 4 days of me not posting, and I can't be away from you guys for that long. So I decided to try to bust one out. I got ready fast enough. I had a little time before we got to roll out. So I'm going to read one of the short stories, the standalone short stories. This is also, if you look at the picture here, what we have is one of the mantis, the Klaxxi, the mantis people. I think, yeah, they're the Klaxxi. So you have one of them, and they have like those legendary, whatever they were called, the ones that you have to awaken when you're doing that storyline in, Town Long Steps or something like that, or the Dread Wastes. I can't remember the name of the exact zone in Pandaria, but it's actually pretty fun. I like them as a race. But anyway, their rise, that's way pre. It's not. It might be prehistoric. But if not, it's definitely thousands and thousands of years. So this would happen after what we did, but we should have read it a long time ago. This is part of that Paragon's collection. I discovered it when I was perusing through there, and then lo and behold, I somehow missed it when I was reading the book, or when I was going through the timeline by Excariot there. So it's called Death from Above. I don't know much about it. This is obviously a tie-in to the Mists of Pandaria expansion. We've got these Soroks, and they're fighting Klaxxi, probably some of the Klaxxi legends. It does say it's a long one, but I think the pages are really short. So stay a while and listen to Death from Above by Robert Brooks. He is a guy that we've read. He's a big name in Warcraft lore. So I know he writes for the game. I think we've read some of his books, but maybe not. 1. He floated alone. Time meant nothing. Finally, the sound of her music rippled through the stillness. Swarm the wall, the Empress sang. The strong will return. The weak will not. Kilrook opened his eyes for the first time. Smoke and dust shrouded the eastern horizon. Only the faint outline of the wall, the serpent's spine, was visible through the brume. Echoes of war hung in the air, the joyous cries of the young mantid and the screams of the dying blending into the distinctive harmony of clashing blades and rending flesh. The new cycle had truly and gloriously begun. A group of elder mantid watched from a hill to the west. And if you are unfamiliar with the mantid, and their lore, they're basically a race that, kind of like cicadas, they just rise every 1,000 years or 2,000 years or something like that, and then they come and they attack, and then for whatever reason, they become dormant again. But during those periods, they are very devastating to the people of Pandaria. The Swarmborn seem healthy, vibrant. The Empress nurtured them well, said one. None disagreed. They had all observed the young mantid stampeding toward the wall mere minutes after entering the world, unable to think of anything but slaughtering the lesser creatures. Their enthusiasm will prove useful should the Mogu continue to provoke us. Nothing tempers ambition more than the fear of oblivion. The elders wordlessly clicked and chattered. It was the sound of agreement, but not of commitment. There was no need to make a decision just yet. For now, the Klaxxi would simply watch. Events were progressing as expected. A lone Mogu, clothed in ornate, precisely tailored robes, stepped into the large tent and coldly eyed the slaves scurrying around the odd collection of polished hollow white tubes. With a loud, scornful voice he pronounced, "You told Warlord Gurthon your weapons would be ready by now. He is disappointed in your failure." The 16 slaves, mostly Pandaren, though there were a few Jinyu, went still with fear. Far in the back of the tent, a bulky figure slowly stood up, face shrouded in shadow. He leaned forward. The edge of his jaw caught the glow of a flickering brazier. Despite the hostile words from the visitor, the larger Mogu's expression was forbiddingly calm. "If Warlord Gurthon were disappointed in me, he would have told me himself, Hishin," said Taskmaster Shui-Shin. "Perhaps you are unaware of recent events. The Mantid are attacking," Hishin said blandly, as though it were possible to miss the horrific sound of the fighting to the west. "Warlord Gurthon has more important matters to attend to than a delinquent arcanist and the misuse of a few slaves." Delinquent? Shui-Shin kept a firm grasp on his temper. Hishin was by far the slipperiest of Warlord Gurthon's advisors. He never provoked someone without a reason. No doubt he wished to carry tales of Shui-Shin's rage back to the Warlord. If he can't respond calmly even to simple criticism, Warlord Hishin would undoubtedly say, can he really be trusted with critical duties? It was no secret that Shui-Shin had the Warlord's confidence in almost all areas of the arcane. Even the Zandalari sought his counsel and advice. Hishin would need to discredit him before supplanting him. He seeks to ascend by stepping on my head. And I just recently, for fun, went and did like Mogushan Vault's raid just to go back and hunt for some mounts and transmogs and stuff. And I forgot just how the Zandalari were already a big thing helping out in Mists of Pandaria. So even though it took them a few expansions to become a playable race, by Mists of Pandaria, they're already starting to become a big part of the lore. And in Chronicles, we read about that too. "The Huatang will be ready when it is ready," Shui-Shin said. "And when it's ready, I'll tell Warlord Gurthon myself." "Should I tell him to expect a working weapon in days, weeks, months?" "The insects will not wait," Hishin said in the same bland political voice. He ran his finger absently along the rim of a strange ornate urn sitting on a table next to him. "Tell him whatever you like," Shui-Shin said. "I suppose I have to inform the Warlord you don't have an answer. Do not test me, advisor." "Go together, swarm the wall." The Empress's words filled their minds. She gave them purpose. Her desires were their desires, and they did not hesitate to obey. Without her, the Mantid were nothing. "The strong will return, the weak will not," she said. Kilrook and dozens of other flyers rose into the air and went east again. It was their third trip to the wall, or perhaps their fourth. Kilrook hadn't really kept count. All he cared about was her voice urging him onward. He had craved battle from his first moment of life. His instincts took care of the rest. His antennae twitched restlessly. His forelegs remained tucked up beneath his abdomen, settling easily against his carapace. Even the act of keeping his four transparent wings buzzing together behind his back was as natural as breathing. "The lesser creatures must die," she sang to them all. "Sweep them away." From so high in the air, the ground itself seemed to writhe with her wrath. Thousands upon thousands of Mantid pushed east without thought toward the lesser creatures in their pathetic obstacle. Even though their wall jutted into the sky, the Empress had ordered it to fall, so it would. "They call it the serpent's spine," the Empress had sneered. "Break it." On the ground, the Swarmborn charged the wall, attempting to climb its sheer face. Already piles of broken carapaces were growing at the base of the spine. The climb was exhausting and dangerous, and the few Mantid who managed to reach the top found themselves alone against scores of defenders. They did not survive long. Kilrook and the other flyers hovered high above the wall's battlements, far out of range of any archers. Each of the Mantid carried a net filled to bursting with strange nuggets that leaked wisps of vile smoke. An ambersmith with a missing eye had called them rounds. "Decorate their heads with these," he had hissed while shoving nets into his forelegs' grasp. The flyers plucked the rounds from their nets and let them fall. They burst open in sprays of poison and acid showering nearby defenders. The lesser creatures scurried around for a few moments, shouting in pain and confusion, but the poison soon dispersed in the wind. The defenders retook their positions at the wall's edge and sent more arrows and rocks against the Mantid climbers. Kilrook continued to drop rounds. It was oddly unsatisfying. He wanted to see the lesser creatures' agony up close. He wanted to paint the battlements with their blood. Dropping bombs from so high felt too clean, too detached, and not terribly useful. When the flock ran out of rounds, they flew back to the ambersmith. The other flyers chattered happily along the way. Kilrook brooded in silence. The Embersmith had more nets waiting in the shade of a Kipari tree sapling. For 2 days and nights they repeated the same actions. Fly to the wall, drop rounds from the sky, go back for more nets, over and over. By the second night of the cycle, most of Kilrook's flock had curled up from exhaustion underneath some of the larger Kipari trees. Kilrook merely took another net of rounds and flew on without them. The wall still stood. The Empress's enemies still lived. How could he rest? He didn't succumb to fatigue until the sun rose on the 4th day. 2. A hawk rode the afternoon breeze high above the ground, hunting in solitude. Nearly every other beast in Mantid lands had fled the moment the cycle had begun. Only a few baby vermin, too young to keep up with the mass exodus, remained in their warrens, shivering at the sounds of battle in the distance. One of the tiny creatures poked its head above the ground, sniffing at the air, hoping for the scent of food. The hawk spotted it. It folded its wings close to its body and arced downward. Only an instant before hitting the ground, the hawk spread its wings wide, slashing at the air. There was a great flurry of motion, and then it swooped upward, a wriggling baby vermin caught in its talons. With a firm squeeze, the hawk stilled the vermin for good. The hawk wheeled back toward its nest high in a Kipari tree. Suddenly it changed course, angling wide around a lone Mantid flyer hovering nearby. The hawk regarded it with wary eyes, but when it became clear the flyer wasn't preparing to attack, the bird screeched angrily at the delay and winged off. The absence of easy prey had left it hungry. That lone Mantid, Kilrook, simply watched it go with an astonished look. "A hawk? A hawk," said the elder Mantid known as Klaxxi. "This Mantid is fascinated with it. Obsessed, perhaps. He constantly attempts to imitate it." And if you remember the Mantid, they have each of the main Mantid heroes, whatever they're called, I can't remember what they're actually called, has a aspect about them. And I wonder if we're showing, I think Kilrook is, I don't remember if Kilrook's one of them. "Diving from the sky is impossible for us," the other objected. He had wings. Klaxxi did not. "Those of us blessed with flight can hover. We dart nimbly from place to place. That is our advantage. This swarmborn is suicidal. The strain of halting a dive from so high will rip his wings straight off his back." Oops. So used to that. "As I said, he practices constantly," said Klaxxi. "Yesterday he could manage a drop of 10 strides. This morning 15. That is hardly useful. Only this afternoon 25 strides," Klaxxi finished. The other elder Mantid went silent. His forelegs rubbed together in contemplation. Recovering from an uncontrolled fall of 25 strides was the limit of even highly skilled Mantid flyers. "So he's becoming stronger." "Yes, much stronger. It appears so," Klaxxi said. "Interesting. In more ways than you may realize," Pock added. "It has barely been a week. The swarmborn are still fragile and terribly immature. They are totally dependent on the Empress's voice, and she has said nothing about such strange tactics." The other Mantid slowly clacked his mandibles together in understanding. "He is acting on his own initiative. He is putting aside her desires. Promising from one so young." His antennae twitched lightly and a rasping chuckle escaped his mouth. "It has been 3 cycles since a paragon has emerged from the swarmborn." That's what they're called. "Perhaps this one will earn a second name soon." And this series is called Paragons, this collection. "Perhaps," Klaxxi said. "Or perhaps he will simply be another who dies before reaching his potential. Indeed, that is how the cycle works, after all." Young comforted himself with a simple thought. It will all be over soon. The savage beatings of the last few hours had left the Pandaren slave almost completely blind, only able to make out vague shapes and shadows. 2 Mogu guards dragged him into bright sunlight and chained him to a tall post. He couldn't tell if they were the same ones he had attacked yesterday. "I hope I hurt them," he thought tiredly. It had been a pitiful gesture, one he knew would mean his death, and yet he didn't regret it even for an instant. "They cannot have my obedience anymore. They do not deserve it." "We're going to try something new on you," one of the Mogu said. Shui Xing, you may fire when ready. Young was too exhausted to be truly fearful, but he was certainly curious. He blinked hard and tried to make sense of the shape in front of him. Odd. It looked as if the Mogu were going to execute him with a big white honeycomb. The last thing Young heard before he died was the sound of crackling arcane energy. Sunset on the 9th day came and went. By sunrise, Kilrook could manage a drop of 50 strides. He wasn't satisfied. The hawk had died at least 100. Still, he could feel his wings growing stronger, the sinews along his back toughening. The Ambersmith had changed locations in the night, placing his nets on the slopes outside of Klaxxi, the home of the Mantid's Cultural Council. When Kilrook returned from the wall, he lingered, mesmerized by the sight of the amber architecture at the top of the hill. He was forbidden to enter, of course. To enter the Klaxxi's realm without an invitation was death. Not for the first time, Kilrook wondered why the Klaxxi were so rarely seen. The Mantid treated the council with respect, but few of the Swarmborn had spotted its members outside the boundaries of their home. None of the Klaxxi had ever been seen joining the fight. In the midst of a glorious ongoing battle, the council seemed useless. The Ambersmith broke Kilrook's reverie. Is something troubling you, Swarmborn? Many things. Kilrook asked the question that had weighed heavily on his mind for a full day. What of the lesser creatures? What do you mean? How can a hawk possibly fly better than I? I am one of the Empress's chosen, Kilrook didn't say. He felt shame over his own inability. He had no desire to reveal it to anyone else. He asked another question. I see different creatures fighting against us on the wall. Different shapes, different sizes, different beings. Why are they working together? The Ambersmith chittered with amusement. Together! The Sauroch and the Pandaren are both enslaved by the Mogu. They have no choice but to fight us. Sauroch? Pandaren? Kilrook did not know these names. He had never bothered to think of the defenders as anything other than lesser creatures. The Ambersmith was happy to explain. The skilled, scaled fighters are called Sauroch. The creatures with the fur and the thick bellies are called Pandaren. The Ambersmith spoke at length about the Mogu and how they had harnessed the usurper's power to establish their empire in millennia past, empowering themselves and subjugating others. Much of the Mogu's greatest work would not have been completed but for the strength of their conquered slaves. When Kilrook asked how the slaves learned to fight, the Ambersmith laughed again. The Sauroch were born to kill. They have not yet found any other purpose. The Pandaren, well, he said, they are forbidden to hold weapons at all until they find themselves on their wall facing us. Kilrook's forelegs twitched with disbelief. The Mogu sent untrained creatures to battle. They could not possibly be so foolish. It is truth, Swarmborn, the Ambersmith said. The Mogu starve rebellion in its infancy. Any Pandaren who shows sign of dissent are sent to the wall as punishment. Thus the strongest among them are here to face us, but they are here only to die. Kilrook hadn't known the Mogu had such a rich sense of humor. He laughed until his antennae hurt. A young Pandaren boy poured a fresh cup of tea. A few errant drops splashed to the floor, and he squeaked in fear. Shui Xing ignored him and sipped the tea politely. I was pleased to see the successful demonstration of the Hotang. Warlord Gurthon wishes you to use it in battle immediately, Xing said. Tell Warlord Gurthon, Shui Xing said, his words rumbling through the tent, that I wish to personally and privately discuss how he would like to use the Hotang. There is no need, Xing said. The advisor handed over a tightly rolled parchment, an official clan Gurthon order, sealed by magic. Shui Xing took it and examined it, suspicious. What is this? Xing took a small sip of tea. The will of Warlord Gurthon. Shui Xing carefully eyed the other Mogu. It was inconceivable that Warlord Gurthon would use this political creature as an intermediary, yet the seal felt genuine. He conjured up a small amount of magic and unsealed the parchment. It contained a short message. Display your potential by nightfall. Do not disappoint me again. Shui Xing said nothing. Only the distant sound of battle and the shallow, frightened breaths of the Pandaren slave kneeling in one of the tent's corners could be heard. The Watang had been tested only once on a slave. It was untested in battle. The slightest imbalance in the flow of energy could disrupt it. A large imbalance could be catastrophic. Battle has a way of introducing imbalances, Shui Xing thought grimly. Not that he would admit that to the bottom feeder sitting across from him. Shui Xing drained his cup. So be it. Tell the Warlord the skies will belong to him soon. He stood up to leave. Thanks for the tea. He didn't bother to take the parchment with him. Xing watched him go, not allowing himself to smile until Shui Xing had disappeared from view. Dispose of this, Xing told the slave, handing him the parchment. I want a blade, Kilrook said. The Embersmith looked puzzled. Why? I need talons. What? I have seen how the Manted fight on the ground with blades, Kilrook said. I wish to join them. You are a flyer, the Embersmith said. You are not meant for that. The wingless cannot reach the battlements, Kilrook said. The climb is too dangerous. There are piles of Manted dead all along the base of the wall. I have wings. I can drop onto their battlements from above. You are not meant for that, the Embersmith repeated, more confused than ever. You can still sense the Empress's will, can you not? She tells you to remain in the air. I will be her talons, Kilrook mumbled. I don't understand. Then we are done talking. But by sundown on the 10th night, Kilrook could survive a dive of 75 strides. 3. On the 14th day of his life, Kilrook earned the Empress's favor. Kilrook and the rest of the flock were dropping rounds over the battlements, hovering safely out of range of any attackers. The gnawing feeling of uselessness continued to eat away at Kilrook's mind, yet he obeyed the Empress's command and rained poison on the lesser creatures. His net was only partially empty when strange sounds rang out, crackling, then a deep stuttering rattle like a giant tree trunk snapping in half in a storm's gale. Kilrook's first reaction was confusion. He had never heard such an odd sound before. An instant later, startled cries of pain and surprise filled the air. 5 flyers to the north tumbled from the sky, chunks of flesh and wing falling beside them. The other Manted clicked and chattered, alarmed. Archers? Perhaps with improved bows? There had been little threat from them in previous raids. After a moment of searching the ground, Kilrook spotted an odd shape on the edge of the Mogu encampment behind the wall. From his perspective, it first looked like a honeycomb, but as he looked closer, Kilrook realized it was a collection of tubes, stacked together in a round bundle as tall as a Mogu. White smoke drifted from its openings. They had placed the bundle of tubes on wheels and aimed it directly at the Manted flock. Slaves scurried around the front of the honeycomb, shoving handfuls of pebbles into the tubes. More crackling filled the air. Kilrook understood just in time. Shui Xing fed arcane power into the back of the weapon in one violent burst. Boom! The sound of the blast drowned out all other noises, the concussive force a hammer's blow to his chest. White smoke clouded his vision. He could dimly see several Pandaren slaves lying still on the ground in front of the Watang. Dead, most likely. Shui Xing hadn't waited for them to move out of the way. He would teach the others to move faster. As the smoke wafted away, the effects of the weapon became clear. The first shot had been slightly wide, killing only a few of the flyers on the north edge of the flock, but the second shot had hit dead center. Dozens of Manted flyers fell toward the ground. Some fell in pieces. Shui Xing even spotted one still clinging to its net, its wings motionless. Maybe 3 or 4 flyers in the entire flock had escaped unharmed, and they had the sense to turn and flee back to their lands out of Shui Xing's reach. Reload! Shui Xing bellowed. The slaves shoveled more pebbles and small rocks into the tubes, tightly packing them in. Shui Xing carefully began gathering more energy to fire again. A third shot was probably unnecessary, but why take chances? This weapon worked better than he had dreamed. The skies above this section of the Serpent's Spine had been cleared in 2 volleys. Just 2. They'll have to thank the Zandalari for this, he thought. The Troll's command of the arcane was primitive compared to the Mogu's, but observing their techniques had driven Shui Xing's own thoughts in unexpected directions. Who else among the Mogu would have imagined that tiny rocks, even propelled to incredible speeds with arcane energy, could cause such damage? The screams of the wounded came from all sides. Nearly the entire flock had been shredded. Rocks and pebbles had torn through dozens and dozens of flyers, punching holes through their carapaces. They fell out of control. Kilrook fell with them, but he was not out of control. He was not dying. He was diving like the hawk. The moment before the honeycomb fired, Kilrook had hugged the net close to his chest and tucked his wings behind his body. The rounds in his net had shielded him from the worst of the weapon's blast. The rest of the pebbles had whistled through the air around him. The wind rushed by wonderfully fast. As Kilrook descended, his heart soared. The Mogu hadn't fired a third shot. They must have thought the flyers were all dead. It was time to show them their error. Can you see me, Empress? Kilrook whispered. The shock of the attack had made him forget her song, but now he could hear her again, singing softly and commanding the Swarmborn onward. Was there a note of sorrow in her melody? Had she seen what the Mogu's new weapon had done? Kilrook let go of the net. It seemed to float away slowly. He slightly spread his wings, catching just a bit of the rushing air. It hurt. Threatened to tear his wings clean off. This would be a far, far longer dive than any he had previously attempted. Perhaps he would fall 200 paces. Perhaps 250. Empress, watch me. They're all dead, Shui-Shing called. With a careful twist of his wrist and a relaxation of his will, the arcane energy he had gathered safely fizzled away. We're moving north. North meant the gate of the setting sun, and the biggest concentration of Mantid. First, he would wipe out any flyers still aloft there, and then he would... A shadow fell over Shui-Shing. He barely had time to look up before an ear-shattering screech of Mantid fury descended upon him. Kilrook landed with his feet in the Mogu's stomach. He tried to stab the creature through its chest with his forelegs, but the impact was extraordinarily violent. The Mogu went sprawling, and Kilrook was thrown off, skidding through the mud and rolling to a stop against the flimsy cloth walls of a slave's tent. A calm thought swam into Kilrook's head. I need to practice landing. Kilrook fought off his daze and leaped to his feet. He was surrounded by lesser creatures, but his dramatic arrival had unnerved them. The Pandarin and even the Saurok instinctively shrunk back in surprise. A dead Pandarin lay at Kilrook's feet. Strange wounds, perhaps killed by the honeycomb. Friendly fire. A chipped sword lay next to the creature. Foul, cheap steel. Pathetic. Kilrook scooped it up anyway. For the moment, the weight was unfamiliar and ungainly in his hand. Then Kilrook remembered the hawk, its talons, how naturally it had snatched its prey. Now I have a talon. Suddenly the sword was like an extension of his body. It felt no stranger in his hand than his wings did on his back. Kilrook heard a deafening explosion on the battlements. He and the lesser creatures flinched. Oh yes, my neck. It had still carried plenty of rounds when Kilrook had released it while falling. Upon hitting the top of the battlements, they had burst all at once. Oh man. A cloud of poison and acid expanded rapidly. At least it would keep the wall's defenders occupied for a time. Kilrook let his wings propel him into the mass of lesser creatures near the honeycomb. His new talon drew blood almost immediately. It was madness. Mantid flyers never fought hand-to-hand on the ground. Nisus bellowed an order to his fellow Saurok, encircle and attack. Even the best Mantid fighters would eventually fall to that tactic. If the Pandarin slaves were smart, they would get out of the way. If not... The crazed flyer leaped onto a fleeing Pandarin and tore into his midsection with its forelegs. Nisus charged in, swinging a steel blade, but the Mantid's wings buzzed and the creature lifted out of reach. Nisus hesitated. It dropped down and eviscerated another Saurok with a swipe that almost looked casual. Then it rose back into the air, and encircling wasn't going to work. It has wings. The thought was ice in Nisus's mind. If they couldn't encircle it, what could they do? The Mantid bent over a dying Saurok, and Nisus lunged with a strike against its unarmed side. To his surprise, his sword thrust was blocked by steel. The Mantid had picked up a second blade, the dying Saurok's sword. The flyer whirled and slashed with both swords. Nisus managed to parry only one. A deep fang of mortal injury blazed in his chest. The Mantid spun away and leaped toward new opponents, shouted something odd, something about an empress. Nisus toppled to the ground and felt his life's warmth joining the cold mud. Madness. This isn't happening. Shui-Shing flung another molten blast, missing again. This can't be happening. The other Mogu in the vicinity staggered away, his thigh open to the bone. It's only one Mantid. The flyer lifted into the air as Shui-Shing set the ground beneath it on fire. This was no time for finesse. Shui-Shing crouched and cupped his hands, gathering every ounce of power he dared, heedless of his proximity to the new Huatang. It was sensitive. It could react badly to excess energy, but that was a problem for later. For now, shunk. Shui-Shing stared in surprise at the steel protruding from his chest. The Mantid had thrown one of its swords. This isn't happening, his mind wailed. He collapsed on all fours. No, he would not let this Mantid survive. Shui-Shing continued to gather power even as darkness crept around the edges of his vision. Crackling energy seemed to infuse the very air around him. He lifted a shaky, weakening hand toward the flyer. Crackling sounds arose from everywhere, uncontrolled and untempered. The expression on the dying Mogu's face told Kilrook everything he needed to know. The flyer strained into the air without a second thought. The Mogu lifted its hand toward Kilrook with its last breath, but just before it could unleash the spell, The final bit of life left its body. The creature went limp. The energy it had gathered suddenly rushed out in all directions. Excuse me. The honeycomb quivered and shook, then disappeared amid a shimmering shockwave of pure light. Kilrook kept climbing into the sky until the echoes of the explosion faded away. Far below he could see the edge of the Mogu encampment burning. Nearby tents and defenders alike had been torn apart by the blast. Even the rear face of the serpent's spine seemed singed. Whatever that foul weapon had been, it was unstable, prone to utter disaster for those who tried to use it. Kilrook would remember that if he saw another. As he flew back to the Ambersmith, he realized that something had changed. The Empress was singing a new song. "Behold our might," the Empress was saying. "Behold our strong. See the smoke rise from the lesser creature's camp. Their new weapon is gone, destroyed by a single one of my favored." "Empress," Kilrook breathed. "Empress, are you watching?" His antennae curled in ecstasy. The Empress was singing of him, my favored. The swarm born on the ground stared up as he flew past. Flocks of fires surrounded him and followed him home. "Behold my wrath striking from on high," the Empress sang. "Behold my death descending from above. Behold the Wind-Reaver." The flock repeated her words in awe. "Wind-Reaver." I think that is one of the main paragons that you do in that quest line. "Empress," Kilrook said. She had seen him. "Wind-Reaver." As Kilrook approached Klaxxi, he spotted a hawk circling near one of the Kipari trees. It was the same hawk he had seen days earlier. Kilrook flew toward it. The bird saw him coming and dove. "Hawk," Kilrook thought a few minutes later, "tastes delicious." 4. "We have much to discuss, Wind-Reaver," said Klaxxi Pock. Kilrook hefted his 2 new blades, forged from the purest Kiparite available at the Empress's orders. They gleamed in the daylight. Only her favored could claim such an honor. We can talk once the lesser creatures are destroyed. We will not delay you long." "The Empress has ordered the deaths of all the lesser creatures," Kilrook said. The look in the elder Mantid's eyes was strange. It was almost as if he was disappointed that Kilrook would not put aside the Empress's commands. "Any delay is unacceptable." "Very well," Klaxxi Pock said quietly. "Be careful. I believe the lesser creatures will do everything they can to prevent you from achieving your potential. They may yet have more vile weapons like the honeycomb. They will use them against you. Good. I will destroy those as well." Warlord Gurthon gently kneaded the forehead of the young Kuai Lin, sitting patiently at his side as he watched the lone Mantid drive toward the distant battlements. Thin, dark arrows leapt up to meet it but missed. The Mantid disappeared behind the edge of the wall, and Gurthon could no longer see the fighting. Judging by the screams drifting across the camp, his defenders weren't faring well. "Tell me again, Huixing," Gurthon said, keeping his eyes on the serpent's spine. "Why did Huixing fling himself into battle without my permission?" "He seems to have been overconfident in his own skills, Warlord," Huixing said. "I, of course, begged him for weeks to notify you the moment the Watan was ready, so you and he could formulate a proper strategy." I did it again. Gurthon didn't say a word. He simply reached into his pocket and withdrew a small scrap of parchment. Holding it at arm's length, Huixing instantly went quiet. One of the junior advisors, Fulmin, took the scrap and looked at it. His expression grew puzzled. "This has your seal on it, Warlord." "Indeed it does," Gurthon said. Huixing shifted uneasily behind him. The Ambersmith had done well. The twin amber blades felt balanced and deft in Kilrook's hands, and the armor fit perfectly without restricting his ability to fly or kill. Kilrook cleaved a path into the defenders' midst. They had sent their best today. That was good. Today he would have to prove their best couldn't stop him. Even from such a distance, Warlord Gurthon could see dark crimson dripping off the Mantid's blades. The sight of a single Mantid cleaving a swathe through the defenders was infuriating, humiliating. This is what the Huatang was meant to stop. "Do you know where that parchment was found, Huixing?" Gurthon asked. "I do not, Warlord." "A Pandaren boy turned it in. One of your slaves, I hear. He said you told him to dispose of it after you showed it to Huixing. He seemed to think he might find a less cruel master if he exposed your treason," Gurthon said. The reaction was instantaneous and vehement.
"Lies!" Hishin spat. "Bring him to me. We will see what he has to say when—"
"The child is dead." Warlord Gurthon's words froze Hishin's tongue. "Any slave that touches an official Clan Gurthon seal must of course be executed. But I assure you, Hishin, he was encouraged to speak the truth before he died." Hishin's eyes darted nervously.
"Warlord, you cannot trust the dying words of a slave, of a child. I've served you faithfully for years."
"I remember this parchment," Warlord Gurthon said. "Display your potential by nightfall."
"I enchanted those words more than 3 years ago. I believe I was addressing one of my junior beastmasters, asking for a demonstration of his skills in training battle Kuai Len. Circumstances made the document redundant and it was never delivered, so the seal wasn't broken and it was sent to my archives. I have made inquiries since Shui Xing's demise. It seems the parchment was stolen recently." "Warlord, You served me as my chief archivist for years, did you not, Hishin?"
Hishin dropped to his knees, sputtering out an apology he would never have a chance to finish. Warlord Gurthon pursed his lips and whistled twice. One long tone, one short. The Kuai Len at his feet leaped for Hishin's throat. The former advisor, let out a strangled cry of fear. The unpleasant noises lasted only a short time, and the Kuai Len trotted back to the warlord's side, licking blood off its chops. The other advisors seemed unable to take their eyes off the mess.
"I should not," Warlord Gurthon said to them all, "have to learn the truth from the wails of a dying slave."
He turned back toward the wall.
"Every 100 years the Mantid attack. Every 100 years we fight them to a standstill, and they retreat into their lands as though they never intended to fight us in the first place. Nobody has ever known why."
Gurthon let his voice drop to barely above a whisper.
"I did not seek command of the Serpent Spine to settle for another stalemate. Shui Xing's weapon was a chance to change that, to finally establish control of the land beyond the Spine, and finally launch an attack against the Mantid. That opportunity has been sabotaged. It will take time to build more Otang. What else can we do?"
The advisors remained silent. Most still stared at what was left of Hishin. Finally, Fulmin cleared his throat.
"Warlord, the relic."
Warlord Gurthon gave him a flat look. The relic was a project Shui Xing had studied years before the Mantid Swarm. It was a fascinating object of arcane origin, but no experiment had managed to produce anything more useful than an irritating hum.
"The relic is not a weapon, Fulmin, and yet it may serve as one." "How? I understand it was once meant for communication."
Gurthon paused. An interesting idea occurred to him.
"Are you suggesting we could negotiate with the Mantid?"
"Perhaps if they could be convinced to join Clan Gurthon."
"No, Warlord. The relic uses sounds we do not have the ability to hear. Shui Xing experimented with it long ago but found no use for it. When he tested the relic with an abundance of arcane energy, he described the effect as a wall of sound beyond our hearing," Fulmin said. "He didn't see a purpose for it, given the dangers of using the relic at all."
"What is your point?" Gurthon asked.
"Shui Xing's experiments took place in the Veil. We are much closer to the wall now. I suggest we continuously overload this relic with all the energy we dare. I want to try out the wall of sound. If I am correct, the arcane energy won't facilitate Mantid communication. It will prevent it altogether."
It took several moments before Warlord Gurthon understood.
"You're speaking of an unproven theory." "Yes, Warlord.
That the Mantid Empress gives orders and direction to her swarm from a distance, that she can speak into their minds."
"Yes, Warlord."
Gurthon let the implications play out in his head.
"You believe there is a connection, that the relic and the Empress communicate in the same way. What exactly would the relic do if overloaded? Overwhelm her words?" "Essentially, Warlord. Perhaps we can drown her out. At the very least, the relic might make the Mantid confused. At best," Fulmin shrugged, "I'm not certain. The effect could be dramatic. I suspect that it will provoke a tremendous reaction."
Warlord Gurthon scratched the Kuai Len on the forehead again.
"If you're wrong, we gain nothing." "If I'm wrong, we lose nothing," Fulmin said.
Warlord Gurthon smiled.
"Except you. I've been told the relic is unstable. It once magnified a small amount of energy by 100-fold and sent it back into an arcanist. Very unpleasant.
Very messy. He glanced down at the remains of Hishin. Fulmin inclined his head.
I'm willing to take the risk. Find the relic. Bring it here.
Yes, Warlord. Kilrook left the wall in his wake. His arms and forelegs ached with the pleasant glow of a productive day. A tiny cut on his right leg pained him slightly, but he had otherwise slaughtered the lesser creatures without receiving a single significant injury.
Empress, were you watching?
He muttered. Kilrook let the Empress's song fill his mind, and there was a terrible noise. A horrible, awful, overwhelming noise, and then it was gone. She was gone, just like that. Kilrook blinked and fell from the sky.
Empress,
he said. His wings stayed still. The ground rushed to meet him.
Empress!
She's gone. Panic surfaced. Where the voice of the Empress had once sung, only a dead hum remained. Total silence.
Empress!
Kilrook remembered to fly before hitting the ground. He hovered numbly, straining to hear her voice. She's gone. Why is she gone? What happened to her? Is she... The sudden silence from the west hung in the air. For a few moments all manted sounds ceased. Then shrieks of agony, terror, and grief rippled across the land. A smile spread across Warlord Gurthon's face. 5.
6 days. It has been 6 days, said Klaxxi. Do any of you still cling to hope that the Swarmborn will suddenly emerge from their fugue and return to the fight?
No, said another council member.
Unless we wish to try to bring the Empress into the open again.
It was not a serious suggestion. 3 days ago, the Klaxxi had convinced the Empress to greet the Swarmborn in the open face to face to prove she had not been killed but merely silenced by the Mogu's strange relic. Thousands and thousands of Swarmborn had gathered at Klaxxi, but when she appeared they had not recognized her. Unable to speak into their heads as she once could, she had no influence on them. They simply stared at her. The only good news was that the Swarmborn had not left. A solid mass of Mantid still milled aimlessly around Klaxxi. They would at least serve as living shields against the Mogu's inevitable attack. None of the Klaxxi had any hope they would attempt to fight. Klaxxi limped to the center of the chamber. A wound he had suffered 3 days earlier pained him deeply. He came to a stop next to the large, smooth chunk of round amber that had been found and relocated to Klaxxi only an hour ago. Inside lay a legend, a hero of the Mantid preserved in case of a great crisis. A paragon.
Then this is our only chance,
Klaxxi said flatly.
The Wind-Reaver should take the role of the Wakener,
another council member said. I love that, getting that title, the Wakener. All turned to look at him.
You know as well as I do that he is distracted. He is not useless, not like the others, but his mind still cries out for the Empress's voice. The presence of a paragon may draw him out of his depression. Bring him here.
A sound rippled through the silence. The paragon opened his eyes for the first time in centuries. The vessels of his preservation, the amber egg, crumbled around him. Air flooded into his lungs. It hurt. The Mantid toppled to the ground, retching uncontrollably. The ember had kept him alive, and his body rebelled against its absence. It took some time before he regained control of himself. There was a healthy supply of Tapari sap laid out before him, and he feasted upon it. He sensed there were a number of Mantid watching him, yet they did not interrupt. It was a sign of respect. They would pretend not to notice his weakness, for now anyway. Soon his strength trickled back, his limbs trembled, yet he forced himself to stand.
I hear the Klaxxi's call,
Ninilko rasped.
I have returned.
One of the other Mantid in the room spoke.
Ninilko, the blood caller. Are you well?
He asked. Yes, Ninilko said with pleasure. If they knew his name, they knew his reputation.
Tell me what crisis has led you to awaken me. I await your...
He blinked. There were 3 Mantid standing before him, 2 of whom wore the traditional garb of a Klaxxi. Neither of them was his Wakener. Ninilko could tell. He sensed that the 3rd Mantid, the one with the interesting armor and weapons.
You are not a member of the Klaxxi. What is your name?
I am Kilrook. Some call me Wind-Reaver. Some? He is not a paragon, Ninilko thought. Interesting. Why did the Klaxxi choose him as my Wakener?
Bloodcaller,
one of the Klaxxi said,
we require your aid. The cycle is in danger.
Ninilko pushed aside his curiosity over the 3rd Mantid.
Tell me what you need. The lesser creatures have invaded. The Empress stands on the brink of annihilation,
another Klaxxi said. Then replace her with another, Ninilko didn't say aloud. If the Klaxxi hadn't already prepared for that, there were mitigating factors and the option wasn't worth mentioning.
I must see the enemy's movements before I can form a plan.
Kilrook tilted his head slightly. He looked oddly distracted, but his voice was strong.
I can carry you, Blood Collar. I will show you the enemy.
Ninilko glanced at the two Klaxxi. They both nodded.
Let's go, Wakener.
Only one building on the terrace of Gurthon had been completed in the 6 days since the mantid had been broken. Those slaves had worked night and day to lay the foundations and construct walls for a dozen more. For now, the completed building would serve as a war room. Warlord Gurthon decided, when the mantid were utterly defeated, it would be a fitting place to receive ambassadors from the other Mogu clans. They would undoubtedly seek his favor when all that land west of the Serpent Spine suddenly became unoccupied. Fulmin led Warlord Gurthon inside.
I would like to show you something,
the advisor said. At the south end of the war room sat an unfamiliar object.
I've had this prepared for you over the past few days, Fulmin said. It is finally ready.
Warlord Gurthon inspected the offering closely. It was a large urn gilded in bronze. It seemed to shimmer, and he sensed residues of arcane energy drifting about like wafts of smoke near a stick of incense.
What is its purpose? It occurred to me, Warlord, that when we finally kill the Mantid Queen, we will need a proper place to display her remains, Fulmin said.
The Warlord's low laugh rumbled through the room.
I admire your foresight. Furthermore, the advisor added, we may not even need to kill the Empress to render her helpless.
Explain.
With a simple arcane spell, we can suspend the Empress's spirit in this urn. Her physical form will vanish, but her mind will be trapped. It will be like a heavy sleep with troubled dreams, Fulmin said. And if any of the other Mogu doubt that you have truly conquered the Mantid, you merely need to summon her spirit. Her very essence will be at your command. Her mind will be your trophy.
The Warlord grimaced.
No. If the Mantid know she is still alive, they might fight to save her. I won't give them a chance to bring her back.
Ah, Fulmin said with a smile.
That is why I crafted a spell to be immutable to the Mantid. They will not be able to damage the urn, much less free the spirit inside.
It's too much of a risk.
I will stake my life on it, Fulmin said. Capture the Mantid Queen, suspend her spirit. Then to test it, throw the urn to the rest of the insects. If any of them are even able to scratch it, take my head as punishment.
Warlord Gurthon regarded him for a moment. Rare was the Mogu willing to wager his life on success, and Gurthon had to admit that the notion of keeping the Mantid Empress's spirit as a memento of victory greatly appealed to him.
Fulmin, I think you'll have earned more responsibilities once we settle the Mantid, Warlord Gurthon said. Can you teach me this spell?
Yes.
Then do so, right now.
Warlord Gurthon let a wide grin split his face.
I intend to end the Mantid today.
The view from the air was incredible. Ninilko crouched on the Wind-Reaver's back, letting the flyer carry him ever higher, finally cresting at almost 1,000 paces in the sky. The paragon said nothing, and Kilrook didn't make any conversation. Ninilko simply studied the movement of the Mogu's army. The situation was certainly dire. The Klaxxi hadn't exaggerated. Unless the lesser creatures moved cautiously, the army would likely attack Klaxxi before sunset. And even though thousands of Swarmborn were packed together encircling the site, they wouldn't provide much resistance. Ninilko could sense the absence of the Empress's voice, but it meant little. He didn't know her, and even if he did, he served a new purpose now. Empresses come and go. Ninilko tapped Kilrook on the shoulder, and the flyer jerked in surprise as though he'd woken from a doze. Odd, the paragon thought.
Wakener, who among the Swarmborn is most skilled at attacking that wall?
I am, the flyer said. It was the first good news Ninilko had heard since awakening. Glimmers of a plan danced in his head, yet there were still serious challenges to deal with.
That wall did not exist in my time.
Can you defeat it?
I do not know. So the Empress is doomed.
Kilrook's voice was despondent.
I did not say that, Ninilko said. The cycle will be preserved at all costs. The Empress is doomed.
Ninilko said nothing for a moment. The Wind-Reaver's mind is still immature. He is a creature of the Empress, not the Klaxxi. That was a troubling thought, but it illuminated something interesting. He let his mind chase it, worrying away at its secrets. The pieces fell into place. Ninilko understood why the Klaxxi had forced probably the Wind-Reaver to awaken him. An ambersmith had speculated long ago that the process of reviving a paragon from his amber slumber was akin to an empress bringing her swarmborn into the world. There was a certain logic to the idea. Being preserved was painful. It felt like dying. Who was to say that being awakened wasn't simply being reborn? Young Mantid were hopelessly dependent on the Empress. Perhaps a paragon would feel a similar bond to his wakener, even if it was only a pale shade of such blind loyalty. The theory wasn't entirely wrong, Ninilko realized. Even now. He shook his head sharply. The plan stood out clearly in his mind. He knew how to stop the Mogu, but he would need Kilruk the Wind-Reaver fully focused on the task at hand, not distracted by the Empress's absence. He will die no matter what, but he needs to do as much damage as possible before then, Ninilko thought.
Wakener, how long have you served the Empress?
Since I arrived in this world,
Came the irritated reply.
How long have you served the Klaxxi?
Ninilko asked. Kilruk did not answer, so the paragon pressed onward.
To serve the Klaxxi is to preserve the cycle. Preserving the cycle means the Empress survives. Do you not serve them?
I serve the Empress, Kilruk said.
Do you know what the cycle is?
Of course. Explain it to me.
Kilruk's head turned, and the paragon could see the flyer's eye staring back at him. This was dangerous territory, Ninilko knew. If the Wind-Reaver decided he was being treasonous, well, it would be a long way to fall to the ground. After a few moments, Ninilko broke the silence.
You were born knowing about the cycle. You can feel it. You know its importance. It is an instinct that simply has not been explained to you. There is no shame in that. Tell me.
Ninilko very carefully described the 100-year process. Oh, it's 100, not 1,000. How the Empress nurtured the Swarmborn, how they all rushed against the lesser creatures at once to prove themselves in combat.
Only through battle do we grow. It is an efficient mentor, he said.
Ninilko did not mention how often Empresses died and were replaced. When Kilruk asked him what the Empress was like long ago, the paragon changed the subject.
But one cruel truth about the cycle is that this Empress will die one day. She knows this.
She accepts this, Ninilko said.
It is nothing to fear.
Kilruk began shaking. Ninilko waited patiently for the tremors to subside before he continued.
That is why the Klaxxi are here, to make sure the cycle lives on, to make sure her good work never dies.
What use is the cycle without the Empress?
Kilruk whispered. His wings seemed to falter, and the two Mantid dropped a few strides before he regained control.
Battle is an efficient mentor, Ninilko repeated. There is much to learn from the lesser creatures.
And why did Kilruk suddenly go rigid at that statement? Ninilko pushed on, sensing that he had finally reached the flyer.
With every cycle we learn more about battle, about them, about ourselves. We grow stronger, we change. The lesser creatures learn nothing except fear.
Ninilko could feel Kilruk's breathing slow. He was calming down. He was listening.
How long will the cycle last?
Kilruk asked.
Forever. No. The day will come when we need to swarm no more, Ninilko said. Until then, the Klaxxi preserve the cycle. They make sure this Empress, and all other Empresses who will ever live, will live as long as she can. Do you understand?
Kilruk didn't answer, but Ninilko knew the seed had been planted. It was time to let it grow.
Please return me to the Klaxxi, Ninilko said. I must tell them my plan.
Can we win?
Kilruk asked.
Of course.
How?
Ninilko let out a rasping laugh.
By doing what the enemy does not expect. That is how you win any battle.
6.
The centuries you have spent in amber have rotted your brain, blood color.
Listen to me, Klaxxi,
said Ninilko, turning from one Klaxxi to the next. Each faced him with an equally disapproving expression.
The Empress will die by sunset no matter what we do. Am I wrong?
You are not, and yet you propose insanity. We do not have another to take the Empress's place. We cannot put her at risk. If she dies, the cycle ends.
The only solution to the Mogu invasion is the Swarmborn. If we cannot revive the minds of our young, we will not have the numbers to repel them,
Ninilko said softly.
The Swarmborn will not be of use until the relic is destroyed. I cannot destroy the relic while it is surrounded by an army. Our only chance to reach the relic is to tempt the army with a prize they cannot resist. The Empress is that prize. She is the only possible prize. This is my logic. This is my plan. This is why you awakened me. Heed my words.
There was a very long silence.
Warlord!
The junior Mogu scrambled into the building. 7 senior military leaders looked up from the collection of maps and scouting reports scattered across a long table. Gurthon sat at its head.
The Mantid are moving.
Against us?
Asked one of the commanders.
No.
The younger Mogu said, gasping.
Away from us.
Explain,
said Warlord Gurthon. The junior Mogu took a few deep breaths.
Our scouts say a few Mantid left their stronghold by air, carrying another.
Why? Gurthon asked.
Not sure. The one being carried, it looked.
The messenger suddenly appeared nervous. He cleared his throat and carefully chose his words. News of Hishin's demise had spread quickly.
This particular Mantid looked different, very different. The other insects seemed to treat it with care and respect.
The commanders exchanged glances.
Was it the Mantid Empress?
Gurthon asked quietly.
The scouts think so, Warlord. Yes,
the junior Mogu said. Warlord Gurthon slowly stood, his eyes resting on the ornate urn on the corner of the table. His armies had moved cautiously beyond the wall thus far. Gurthon knew one time was on his side. Sooner or later the Mantid would only have reckless, desperate options. This was the moment he had waited for.
They've seen our preparations. They know we are attacking today. They hope to delay their destruction and keep their Empress out of our hands, even if only for a few minutes longer. And now they've removed her from the one place they could have mounted a proper defense.
One of the Mogu commanders looked uneasy.
They may be attempting to draw us out. Of course they are, Gurthon said.
It's precisely what I would do, he thought.
It changes nothing. We have enough warriors to overrun any defense they have.
Your orders, Warlord.
All of the commanders fixed their eyes upon him. The warlord quickly analyzed his options, searching for flaws and unseen dangers. The relic will be vulnerable while the army pursues the Empress, Gurthon thought. That dangerous Mantid flyer still lives. Is this a trap? A smile spread over the warlord's face.
Send everything. Chase the Empress. Bring her here, preferably alive. I want her in this urn by sunset.
I hope the flyer does attack, Gurthon thought.
And make sure the Watang crews are ready. Tell them to expect a strike from the sky.
Kilrook watched the Mogu warriors and their slaves leave behind their tents, their cook fires, their belongings, taking only a single weapon each before rushing to the west. Clearly, the warlord had told them to waste no time. They will kill this empress and every empress who might have ever lived. The thought spun crazily in his head like a spring sapfly near a kapari tree. Strangely, despite his anger, the mind-numbing effects of the Mogu relic seemed dim compared to even an hour ago. He still couldn't hear the Empress, but her absence no longer muddled his thinking. In truth, he had never felt clearer in purpose. The lesser creatures wanted to end the cycle. Kilrook would stop them. Only through battle do we grow, Ninilko had said. It is an efficient mentor. It seemed even the hunger for battle could sharpen a Mantid mind. Kilrook waited until the last stragglers of the Mogu's vast army disappeared over the nearby hills. He lifted into the air. 6 other Mantid flyers rose with him. Only 6. They were the only surviving winged Mantid mature enough to fight without the Empress's voice guiding them. The terrace of Gurthon was laid out before him. The wall towered over it. Kilrook flew toward the wall. 600 strides away on the battlements, the white outlines of 6 honeycombs turned to face him.
There it is, Warlord.
Warlord Gurthon squinted and shaded his eyes against the afternoon sun. Indeed, that distinctive Mantid flyer was approaching from the west. Several other flyers, perhaps 5 or 6, followed closely. To the warlord's surprise, they didn't descend toward the terrace.
Are they attacking the serpent's spine? Fulman said. I suppose they don't know we moved the relic here.
Perhaps, Gurthon said, doubtful. The Mantid weren't known for such oversights. What am I not seeing? Gurthon glanced around the terrace. His guards held their positions, but kept their attention on the Mantid. Even the trained battle Quailen at their heels tracked the flyers across the sky. The first Watang shot rang out just as the winged Mantid crossed the west edge of the terrace. 2 flyers dropped in an instant. The dangerous one was not among them. 200 strides to go. The flock stayed level with the battlements. The Mogu guards on the ground watched closely. The Mantid saw the puff of white smoke a heartbeat before the honeycomb's payload of pebbles whistled past. Kilrook heard impacts on a carapace to his left. Fatal impacts. He didn't know who had been hit, nor did he care. There were 5 more loaded honeycombs to worry about. It was time to see whether the blood caller lived up to his legend as a tactician. Disperse, Kilrook said. The remaining flyers, 4 Kilrook saw in a quick glance, scattered left, right, and up, but didn't descend. The paragon had expressly forbidden it. The lesser creatures will expect you to die for the terrace, Ninilko had told them, so don't. Another honeycomb fired. It missed, low. 2 more fired in tandem, low again. The paragon had been right. They expected the flyers to make a play for the relic. Slaves scrambled over the 4 empty honeycombs, reloading.
Wind-Reaver, most of their shots will be fired at you. They fear you too much to do otherwise,
Ninilko had said. They drew close to the wall, 50 strides to go. The final 2 loaded honeycombs were aimed true. They would not miss, not at this range. 20 strides. Time for the next part of the paragon's plan.
They can't imagine that you wouldn't be the first to strike them,
Ninilko had said.
Neither can I,
Kilrook had responded.
Surprise them. Surprise yourself,
The bloodcaller said. Kilrook's wings suddenly buzzed into a translucent blur. He ascended fast, incredibly fast, almost as fast as he could dive. The final 2 honeycombs tried to track him and cranked off hasty shots in panic. They missed. None of the honeycombs had been reloaded yet. The other 4 flyers fell upon the battlements in a berserker whirlwind of amber and blood. Kilrook let his wings go still. His momentum carried him higher and higher, arcing above the serpent's spine. He reached his zenith about 400 strides above the battlements. It was strangely quiet up here. The sounds of battle were far below. The Empress was silent. For the first time in his life, Kilrook was flying into battle truly alone. It didn't disturb him at all. He began to dive.
Clever,
Warlord Gurthon said, smiling. The flyer had exploited their assumptions and neatly threaded through their defenses. Now it had a clear dive to the serpent's spine.
Very clever indeed.
Should we send reinforcements?
Fullman asked.
No, even if we were to lose everyone on the battlements, it would mean little with the relic.
A shrill cry interrupted the warlord.
Manted! Manted from the west!
Warlord Gurthon spun. A dozen Manted on foot charged toward the terrace of Gurthon, already within 100 paces of the Mogu. All of the guards had been so focused on the flyers.
Clever,
he thought, no longer smiling. Ninilko the Bloodcaller charged into battle with the rest. He hissed and clicked his mandibles, and the other Manted arrayed themselves in a wedge formation. He allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. His time in the amber hadn't quelled his talent a bit. Most paragons received their second name from the Klaxxi. Ninilko was the only paragon to his knowledge who had chosen his own second name. Who else should have? The Klaxxi had lauded him for his sense of broad strategy, and his Empress, weak and pathetic though she might have been, had marveled at his cunning in defeating a Manted rebellion. But which of them would have named him Bloodcaller? Ninilko raised his spear as a fellow Manted sprinted over the last few strides to the Mogu. He pointed the curved blade at the left flank and clicked his mandibles together twice. The entire Manted force targeted 2 particular Mogu. The enemies died in a cyclone of sharpened amber. Ninilko slowly swept his spear across the defender's skirmish line, picking targets. Click, click, click. 3 more Mogu died, leaving a giant hole in their defenses. The left flank collapsed. Click, click. 2 Quailin died. Click, click, click. A mage, a beastmaster, and a wounded Quailin fell next. It was a gift. Ninilko had learned, even as an immature Swarmborn, that he could communicate and influence other Manted without words. When he projected his will, nearby Manted knew where to attack. When he hissed or clicked his mandibles, they knew when. He could send his soldiers in and out of combat at will, directing the flow of battle on an imperceptibly precise level. He had never explained the gift to anyone, not even to the Klaxxi. Ninilko didn't truly understand it himself. Was it the sound they responded to? Could he influence them like the Empress? He wasn't sure. Perhaps he was tapping into some ancient part of the Manted mind, some primal instinct left over after the old one had bestowed them with clarity of thought and a higher purpose. Perhaps this was how the Manted had communicated long ago. In the end, it mattered little. When Ninilko called, blood flowed. Soon the terrace ran red, and Kilrook continued to dive. 7.
Keep reloading,
the battlement taskmaster roared. A Pandaren slave dropped to his knees, desperately sweeping tiny stones into his paws. The sounds of other slaves dying threatened to drive him mad. He wanted to run, but he would be whipped again if... A hideous screech filled the slave's ears and wiped away his thoughts with pure horror. He looked up just in time to see a blur of amber and violet descending upon him. The kneeling Pandaren absorbed most of the impact. Kilrook regained his balance quickly and then swept a blade down into the slave. He felt resistance for a brief moment. His first kill of the battle. There would be many more. 2 of the other flyers still lived, brawling wildly among the lesser creatures. They were eager, excited to battle at the Wind-Reaver's side, but inexperienced. They wouldn't survive long in a fight like this. The battlements were packed. 6 honeycombs and nearly 200 defenders filled the space between the 2 watchtowers overseeing the terrace of Gurthon. Kilrook rushed into the lesser creature's midst and let his amber blades dance. Ninilko leaped back with a hiss. It was the only command he needed. The others leaped back with him. 2 of the Mogu, blinded with battle rage, rushed toward them. Click, click, 7 manted blades filleted them. In less than a minute, Ninilko had halved the number of Mogu defenders while losing a handful of his own. A decent start. Now they were only outnumbered 2 to 1, but the Mogu had recovered from the shock of the ambush and regained their discipline. They formed a loose skirmish line between the manted and the building with the relic. Their tactics would be sound in most battles, Ninilko knew. But not sound enough today. Ninilko darted forward and pointed toward a Mogu in the center of the line. It looked like the most frightened and the most senior. That made it the most valuable kill of the moment. Click. The warlord watched, impassive, only the clench of his jaw betraying his feelings as the last of his commanders died. Finally, he turned toward Fulmin.
Take the relic and go,
Warlord Gurthon said softly.
What?
Fulmin hissed.
We outnumber them.
Gurthon's eyes blazed.
Take the relic and go back through the gate, quietly, unseen. Keep the relic active at all costs. No lapses. We need the manted to remain docile.
Warlord,
I will not let them win. I will not. Do you understand? Our army will end this in an hour. It won't matter what battlefield miracles the manted can unveil if their empress is dead.
Fulmin hesitated.
They'll kill you, Warlord.
I have no doubt they'll try. Go, but hurry back when it's over,
Gurthon added with a twisted smile.
I may need you to wake me up. I can be a heavy sleeper.
Understanding dawned on Fulmin.
Yes, Warlord.
Gurthon watched him go, waiting until he was out of sight before issuing his next command.
Fall back! Fall back into the building!
Kilruk painted the battlements with the lesser creature's blood, and yet they kept coming. What did the Mogu threaten to do if the slaves ran? Kilruk wondered as he cut down another Pandarin. Could it possibly have been worse than this? The heads of 2 Saurok tumbled away from the lizard-like creature's shoulders. What useless beings. Kilruk rose into the air and skimmed above the defender's reach. He sat down near the honeycomb closest to the northern watchtower and gutted the nearest Mogu. A furious pack of Saurok sprung out of the mass of defenders tackling him. Kilruk buried his blades in 2 of them, but was pinned flat on his back an instant later. The weight of dozens of bodies held him immobile. A grinning Saurok's face in the pile hovered only inches from his. And then crackling filled the air. The Saurok looked up. The grin turned to terror. A deafening, overwhelming blast numbed everything. Much of the weight lifted away from Kilruk's chest. Kilruk refused to blink. He wanted to die with his eyes open. He saw... Did they even have eyelids? He saw the Saurok leap upright, only to die as a second blast shook the wall. Before the lesser creature could collapse, it vanished in a third explosion. The noise hung in the air, paralyzing all other senses. Finally, Kilruk blinked. He was still alive. The same couldn't be said for most of the Saurok. Coughing, Kilruk pushed away what was left of them and climbed to his feet. The ringing pain in his ears slowly gave way to screams and wailing. The sight left Kilruk stunned. The Mogu had turned their reloaded honeycombs north, firing directly along the battlements, firing into the battlements. 3 times. They had shredded their own slaves in an attempt to annihilate a single manted flyer. Only the bodies of the slaves that had tackled him had kept him from injury. Kilruk's respect for the Mogu increased substantially. A bold tactic, he mused. Lingering smoke from the blast shielded him from the Mogu's sight. It wouldn't last. Let him think I'm dead with the slaves, he thought. Kilruk stepped off the battlements and descended smoothly to the ground. The sounds of fighting still raged on the terrace of Gurthon. They seemed to have moved into the building where the relic was housed. Kilruk raced toward it on foot. The tight quarters of the building had greatly hampered the attacker's movement. The only other manted still in fighting shape died as 2 Mogu spears cleaved him into thirds before he could respond to Ninilko's hissed warning. The blood-collar was alone on the battlefield. Ninilko put his back to a wall and waited for the inevitable final attack. There were only 3 Mogu left. No, 4, including a strange one wearing ornate regal garments. This last Mogu was standing back from the fight, arms folded across its chest. Its 2 remaining Quailin crouched at its heels. That must be Warlord Gurthon, guessed Ninilko.
Halt,
the 4th Mogu said. The others stopped advancing.
Manted, do you have a name?
The lone insect didn't seem to hear him.
Creature, do you understand me?
Gurthon asked. A sharp, ugly noise rippled through the room. The manted's mandibles clicked open and shut in a strange, raspy rhythm. Is it laughing at me? Gurthon thought.
I am Warlord Gurthon, Manted. I don't care, Mogu.
Gurthon's jaw clenched.
Do you have a name, Mantid?
None that I wish to share with you,
the creature hissed. Kilrook crept to the doorway. He heard Ninilko's voice and another.
Where is the relic?
Ninilko asked.
I have put your species a single step from extinction, Mantid, the other voice said. If you are capable of reason.
Far more capable than you, Gurthon. Where is the relic?
You won't find the relic before your empress is dead, said Gurthon. But perhaps there is no need for all the Mantid to die with her. Some of you are skilled fighters, perhaps.
Are you negotiating?
Ninilko chittered with amusement.
Then here is my offer, Mogu. Kneel before me, beg my forgiveness, hand me the relic, and I will allow you to leave this room alive. What happens to you between here and your wall, I cannot say.
Kneel.
Gurthon's voice turned quiet and furious.
The slaves of the Empire kneel before me. Beasts lay at my feet awaiting my command, and in your arrogance.
Kilrook had no interest in hearing any more. He stepped to the doorway.
Your words waste our time, he said loudly. Face me.
The three Mogu warriors shifted uneasily at the sight of the second Mantid. Gurthon simply pursed his lips and whistled twice sharply. The two Quailin at his heels leaped toward Kilrook's throat. Kilrook swept both of his amber blades up in the air, and both Quailin flopped back to the ground. One of them was still barely alive, a pitiful whine escaping its muzzle. It weakly tried to crawl back to Warlord Gurthon. Kilrook drove one of his forelegs through its torso and ended its feeble cries.
Bloodcaller, I am ready. Are you?
Kilrook asked. Ninilko hefted his spear.
Yes, Wind-Reaver.
They stepped forward, together.
Kill them,
said Warlord Gurthon. The three remaining guards rushed forward to meet the two Mantid. Blades clashed and sparked. Gurthon had no illusions about their chances. His eyes fell on the gilded urn, the one meant for the Mantid Empress. It would have to do.
I will not let them win.
As his guards died, Gurthon crouched and cupped his hands, gathering arcane energy. He would only have time for one spell. The last guard fought bravely, but with its two comrades dying on the floor, it was only a matter of time before one of the Mantid's attacks found flesh. Both of the Wind-Reaver's blades punctured its torso. It collapsed and grunted and lay still. Kilrook turned slowly toward the last Mogu standing.
Gurthon, he hissed, you would have killed the Empress. This Empress and every Empress to come. You would have ended the cycle.
The Mogu warlord was moving his hands in small circles, conjuring power. For what purpose, Kilrook didn't know, or care. Ninilko took a step back.
Wind-Reaver, I leave this honor to you,
the paragon said. Kilrook raised his blades and advanced slowly. If Gurthon planned on unleashing a final attack, some final cowardly gesture, the Wind-Reaver would be ready.
You will die, Warlord. It will not be quick.
Will you enjoy it, insect?
Gurthon spat. Only 5 more strides to satisfaction.
More than you know.
Gurthon's hands suddenly stilled. The air felt alive with power. The Mogu's eyes met Kilrook's.
Good. This I vow. You and your kind will never have the pleasure of ending my life.
The warlord's hands splayed out. A blinding flash of light enveloped the room. Kilrook shaded his eyes with his blades. When his vision cleared, the light had faded. Warlord Gurthon was gone. The urn seemed to vibrate as if imbued with power, energy, life.
No,
Kilrook said. Ninilko allowed Kilrook to rage for several minutes.
Coward! Coward, face me!
The Wind-Reaver struck the urn with his blades over and over. He couldn't scratch it, couldn't budge it. The enchantment Gurthon had used to consign his spirit to the urn apparently protected it from all physical attacks. The warlord was, in short, out of the Mantid's reach. Kilrook swung again and again, blind with fury. Finally, Ninilko had seen enough.
Wind-Reaver,
he said softly. Kilrook didn't slow or stop.
Wind-Reaver, the Empress is still silent.
Kilrook swung at the urn one final time, his blade crashing into it with a strangely muted thump. He faced the paragon, panting.
The relic isn't here. It is moving away from us. You can feel it too, yes?
Ninilko asked. It was an odd sensation. He could only compare it to clouds moving in the sky. From the ground it seemed to happen so slowly that they appeared almost motionless.
Yes,
Kilrook angrily kicked the urn in disgust.
Lead on, Bloodcaller. Let's be done with this.
Fulmin walked carefully along the base of the serpent's spine, clutching the relic to his chest, concentrating on maintaining the spell. Without constant maintenance, the delicate balance of energy would spin out of control. The consequences would be unpredictable, but likely fatal to whoever held the relic. The gate of the setting sun was just up ahead. Once Fulmin was through, he could hand off the relic to another Arcanist and rally a fresh source of Mogu to take back the terrace. The awful noise and flash of light meant Warlord Gurthon had suspended his spirit to avoid death at the Mantid's hands. Well, Fulmin had taught him the technique, and it would be a simple matter to reverse once the Mantid threat was gone. Leaves crunched behind him. Fulmin turned around and nearly lost his balance. A Mantid clothed in bizarre armor and carrying a large spear stood perhaps 15 paces away. It had no wings. It wasn't a flyer. The Mantid raised its spear and pointed it at Fulmin. The Mogu watched with curiosity. He sensed no empowerment. This wasn't a spell. It was too far away for a quick strike. The Mantid made a strange sound. Click. A shadow fell over Fulmin. He didn't even have time to scream. The relic tumbled free of his grasp. A strange object, Kilrook said. The relic still dripped with the Mogu's blood. Ninilko examined it carefully, turning it over in his hands.
I cannot hear the Empress, Wind-Reaver. Can you? No. Arcane energy is beyond my talents,
Ninilko mused. The relic emitted pale light, and with each passing moment the light grew brighter.
The Mogu employ magic in such unusual ways. I do not know how to silence this foul thing.
The paragon glanced down at the butchered Mogu mage. The lesser creature had maintained the spell until its death. Why bother? The relic didn't seem to need a constant supply of new power to keep the Empress suppressed. Ninilko held the relic at arm's length.
Wind-Reaver, perhaps you could see if any...
The light from the relic suddenly flared and vanished. Kilrook saw a dim flash and heard a brief, soft crackling sound. Ninilko felt, only for the smallest moment, most of the remaining arcane energy in the relic shoot up his arm like lightning. There was an instant of pure agony as the energy passed through his brain, burning through every bit of consciousness. The last thing the paragon heard was a single faint click. Kilrook knew instantly that Ninilko was dead. The paragon tumbled into the dirt next to the Mogu mage and lay unmoving, eyes wide and staring. That's why he's not one that you waken. That relic, that cursed vile relic, still blocked the Empress's voice, but not completely. Kilrook could hear quick hiccups of her sweet song. It was as if the fabric of the Mogu spell was fraying, pulling apart thread by thread, allowing brief glimpses of what lay beyond it. How long would it take for the relic finally to go quiet? Would it take hours? That would mean the death of the Empress. Kilrook bent down over Ninilko's body and studied the relic, unwilling to touch it. The light had faded, but he could still hear crackling and hissing, just like the honeycomb. Kilrook picked it up. A trembling energy made his hand shiver. It felt as if the relic might unleash its remaining arcane charge at any moment. He remembered the first day he had dived from the sky into battle when a honeycomb and a little spare arcane energy had reacted in a destructive way. Kilrook let his wings carry him above the battlements. He clutched the relic in his hand as he flew south searching. Defenders all along the wall pointed and shouted at him in surprise. There, the remaining honeycomb still stood amid the dead, desiccated slaves on the battlements overlooking the terrace of Gurthon. The few living slaves and Mogu spotted him almost immediately, but they needed time to line up their shot. Kilrook only needed time to hurl the relic at them. It was nearly the same size and weight as one of his rounds. His aim hadn't faded a bit. The foul thing arced toward the wall and bounced once between the two honeycombs. The relic broke apart with a shimmering wave of light and a shuddering crescendo of crackling. There was a terrible noise, and the light enveloped the honeycombs. Their combined arcane energy swelled into a tremendously bright display, and the lesser creatures were consumed. Then there was a wonderful sound, heard only by the Mantid.
I am ceasing. I'm still here. I'm still here,
The Empress sang. Elation surged through Kilrook with every word. The lesser creatures are here.
Kill them. Kill them all.
Far away from Kilrook, far to the west, a great noise of joy and fury rose into the air. The Swarmborn came awake and their rage burst forth. It was a matter of hours, not minutes. But by sunset, the Empress's song had changed.
Dead, so dead, they are all dead. Well done, well done, I am safe. I am safe. Well done.
8. I was made a paragon. My deeds became legend among my cycle and all cycles to come. The Klaxxi granted me the second name I desired, Wind-Reaver, and it was whispered among the Swarmborn. The army of Clan Gurthon had been annihilated. Both sides had suffered greatly, but the Klaxxi wished to send a simple message. Invading our lands is death. They unleashed me as punishment. I slaughtered thousands of defenders on the wall. Many thousands. After only a few months they would run at the mere sight of me, Wakener. I have such fond memories of that time. Then the Klaxxi allowed me to fly beyond the Serpent's Spine. They instructed me to raid Mogu encampments and supply lines. It had never occurred to me to do so until they gave the order. Strange, yes. It would be such a simple thing for every flyer to soar past the lesser creature's defenses and lay waste to unprepared villages. They would have no way to counter the tactic. It would be tremendously effective. In the death of the lesser creatures, if the death were that goal, that is, truly, Wakener, it is not. If the Klaxxi had wished it, the whole of this continent would be ours by now. As a paragon, I earned the right to ask questions and expect answers. The Klaxxi told me much. They told me about preservation. They explained how an ambersmith of my choice would shape kyperite into the empowered amber shell that would serve as my resting place until there was need of my help as a paragon. I, of course, chose the ambersmith who created my blades. He was honored to accept. He and I went alone to the terrace of Gurthon, and he worked the flow of amber until sleep claimed me for thousands and thousands of years. Of course, that ambersmith was immediately killed. The Klaxxi believe it is important to keep the location of a paragon secret. It requires the power of the entire council to locate our amber eggs. Such secrecy prevents outsiders or lone Klaxxiva from finding and destroying us, though it does happen, as you've seen. They told me so much about the cycle. I suspect you still don't understand, Wakener. The cycle was old when I was young. It predates you and me. I was preserved for thousands and thousands of years, and much has changed. But do you know what hasn't changed? The will of the Klaxxi. The will of the Klaxxi is eternal. You fought many battles, toppled many foes, yet not a single action in your life mattered until you crossed the Serpent's Spine and entered our lands. You obeyed the Klaxxi. You released me from my long sleep in the amber. In doing so, you finally became useful. I mean no insult, Wakener. Rejoice. You have earned our trust. All of you your earlier meaningless struggles have raised you above the other lesser creatures. Few of them could ever be of service as you have been. I've heard plenty about your war, the Alliance, the Horde, two equally useless sides fighting over insignificant goals. I suspect you don't see it that way. Your war could last 1,000 years and it would be but a small river feeding into the ocean of the Klaxxi's plans. Their will is to preserve the cycle. The purpose of the cycle is not death. Indeed, it is knowledge. Knowledge of you. Knowledge of us. Battle is an efficient mentor. All creatures can achieve their potential only when the alternative is death. The Klaxxi ensure that battle lasts as long as possible. It is in their interest to prolong each cycle, pressuring the lesser creatures as much as they can without breaking them. Thus the defenders will fight with all their skill, fearing that everyone they know and love stands on the brink of oblivion if they fail. The strongest among the Mantid return alive. The weak are culled. Our kind grows stronger, and with each cycle, we learn about the lesser creatures' tactics and weapons, and we learn how to counter them. There is so much to learn from creatures like you, Wakener. Did I mention that I learned to dive from the sky by watching a hawk? I was utterly fascinated with its ability. I conquered its skills. You fascinate me too, Wakener. So that's a little clip into the future. Also, I feel like that take on the point of the Mantid is very cool. It really makes the Mantid, instead of some just evil race, they're not. Like, much in the way that the war between the Alliance and the Horde is inevitable, what the Mantid are doing is, in their own philosophy, and you could just, I guess, debate whether it's true, it's essential to the growth and evolution and success of life. I like the story a lot, actually. It was very long, longer than I thought to go in one go, but hopefully you enjoyed it. Yeah, so we'll do another short one next time when I get back in a few days, but thanks everybody for watching and for listening, and I will see you all next time on Lore of Warcraft.